The politics at the top of the computer center back then were kind of interesting because they were looking for a new chief information officer. And we had an interim person there who didn't really want to be the CIO. So there's some jostling for position as people are thinking, well, maybe I'd like to be a CIO. And since that idea had gotten loose, and since there were people jockeying for position to be CIO, well, if you wanted to be a CIO, you needed to do something about this notion of, we need a campus-wide information system, whatever that is. Nobody was quite sure what that was, other than there should be some kind of shared bulletin board or place where information pertinent to the university community would show up and people could get to. I mean, it makes perfect sense. And this is, there was no World Wide Web back then. None of the stuff you're used to now existed. So we're all kind of in the dark trying to figure out what would this mean. So the powers that be decided that the best thing to do would be to have a big committee meet to talk about what we wanted and what a campus-wide information system would mean for the University of Minnesota. And since I'm now one of the senior people in the Microcomputer Center, I have to go to this thing. And I'm also thinking, well, what are we going to do in this? This was a politically fraught process because it was such a large committee that there were different factions. I'm representing the people who care about the little computers. There was another faction that really cared about the mainframes, the big computers, because that's where they did all their work, and that's, again, where all the revenue was coming from. And this is like 1990, 1991. Times are tough. Universities had its budget cut, so it's not a lot of fun at the moment. The committee meetings go on and on and on and on. Eventually, though, the committee came up with the idea that, or at least one faction had the idea that, well, we're going to kind of design stuff, and then you microcomputer guys, you figure out how to write that. So we'll design this in the big committee, and then we'll hand that to you, and you go and build that thing. That didn't go over too well, partly because what they designed was really unwieldy and would be really, really hard to develop. And we felt like we were being set up for failure because you can dream up stuff that we can't write or dream up things faster than we can write things. It's not going to be good. So after talking to Farhad about this, Farhad got the idea that, well, maybe we should just ignore them. I don't want to do that. And I said, well, I don't either, really, but I also like to have my job, so we got to do something here. So he said, fine, how could we make this the simplest possible thing? Let's make it so simple that we're sure we can do it. We'll come up with a counterexample. And so he came up with the super counterexample of which was the basis for the Gopher protocol of you send a request, you get back a response that's either a list of things with addresses to get the content or a request that was address and you give the content back. And I looked at that and said, Farhad, we can definitely write that, and it's definitely simple, but it's too simple. We will never get this past that committee because there's no way to find stuff. And I'd been lucky enough to have seen full-text search engines, which everybody's totally used to now, but the notion that you're indexing every word in every document, that was like crazy talk back in 1990 or 1991. But there were a few implementations of that running on small bodies of content. We happened to have a Next computer, Steve Jobs' thing that he did after he got kicked out of Apple. And the Next computer happened to have a full-text search engine as part of it that worked on a body of documents on that single Next machine. Didn't have any notion of going across the machines. Since I'd seen full-text search engines, I said, if we were to hook up a full-text search engine in addition to the directory browsing and get the content back thing, Farhad, then we'd have something that is arguably really cool. That would be really good and super flexible. We also had a sneaky idea out of this. From the committee meetings, we were sure that what was going to happen is there'd be huge arguments about what should be in the top-level menu of the university's campus-wide information system. And these arguments would go on forever and would never be resolved because everyone would have a different opinion. It's like naming the cat, right? Everybody's got an opinion about the cat's name. With the idea of Gopher being whatever the first menu was, depended on which of the Gopher servers you started with, we could sidestep that entire argument. If you liked the official U of M one, go there. Then that's the first menu. And that's the organization. If you didn't like it, go to a different one. Go to the physics department's Gopher server, or go to UChicago's Gopher server. Go someplace else. Doesn't matter. So in a funny way, it was totally egalitarian around what the organization was. Yes, Gopher was structured, but the structure you perceived, at least in the first few layers, depended on where you went and who you decided you liked to start from. So with those ideas, simple, easy to build, had a full-text search engine, didn't matter that much where you started, and people could have their own arrangements and organizations imposed on the data that lived across all the servers, we were pretty sure we had a good thing.